Hello.
Good afternoon.
Hello.
Hey, Max.
Hey, I was like not 100% sure my speakers were working for a second there.
Hello.
Hello.
We get started or?
Sure.
Let's see, Sardash. Ping him.
Oh, I see there's wait, that's for May 10th. Interesting. Joe put himself on the gatekeeper meeting next week.
Yeah, because he was asking about where is a good place to discuss like integrations, and I was like, well, we have this community call, so it might as well, right?
Nice.
Yeah. And then I shared the notes and he added himself.
Very cool.
Yeah.
That'll be fun.
if only we had the gatekeeper integration already, then they wouldn't even need the web.
I have actually a demo integration uploaded to my personal GitHub. The problem, as you might expect, is controller runtime. They haven't yet updated in their released code to work. They haven't cut a release of a version of the code that works with the latest Kubernetes release, which is what has the cell kept code that we want. So the demo is working off of their bleeding edge.
Right.
I saw controller tools got updated, I think yesterday, and I got excited. I thought it was controller runtime, but it was controller tools.
Though this
Yeah.
makes me think about the dependency here, right? Like in terms of if we want like cell to be one of the engines or drivers, this is always going to be a problem.
Yeah, if controller runtime continues to have a latency.
Yep.
Yeah, and I'm not sure what to do about that. Like, we can like move off of controller runtime, but it is, nice for making controllers. Well, with it being controller runtime.
And I think this is a more general problem for every project like KubeBuilder creates.
Yeah, because KubeBuilder assumes controller run. I mean, what's the other one? There's KubeBuilder, and there was another like scaffolding
Operator framework.
Yeah, was there a third? Operator definitely. Oh, and operator has just been used in a couple of contexts. Maybe is what I'm thinking of. Was it one was like a VMware thing or something, or a Red Hat thing?
The operator framework is a Red Hat thing, I think.
Okay, yeah, and operator framework that uses controller runtime as well, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Well,
the sort of like the abstraction thing, right? Like you abstract something, and then now you have to wait for that abstraction. I was just talking to Rita about that for like a separate thing, but also applies here.
Yeah, and this particular instability seems to be around the informers, which is like a bad thing and a good thing, right? It's a bad thing because the interface instability is what prevents us from versioning the Kubernetes code independently of controller runtime code. But it's a good thing in that most of that instability is due to Kubernetes starting to embrace this dynamic watch kind of thing, which is, the basis of Gatekeeper's model for how to watch constraints based off of what constraint templates there are. So maybe at the end of the road here, what it looks like is we can remove most of our watch manager code, which would be nice.
Anyway, it's not like we can get rid of that dependency. So it's just something that we have to continue to monitor, I guess. Yeah,
and you could see also, in the interest of whenever we do wind up updating that dependency, as far as our fork goes, I have a PR on the controller runtime repo. I think I chatted that. I don't think anyone's commented on it. But at the very least, you could see what a fork, if we were to update the fork, what the actual delta is, because right now it's kind of obscured because we sort of copy code to a new package path.
Let me ping a friend.
Do we want to do that, Max, if it's not accepted upstream? So maintain a fork of it separately, and then that might be easier to rebase.
Well, we can't maintain.
So we could fork it under like OPA org, and then maintain it separately, and then that's easier to maintain than like this third-party stuff you're doing.
Yeah, that might actually, yeah, and then vendor-wise, like in
Yeah, we
Go
just
mod,
replace
just
it.
let you
Exactly.
write- okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, would we want to do that as a separate repo? There's also like a Git submodule option if we didn't want to deal with having a completely different repo. I don't know how well those play with GitHub, but
Yeah, I mean, I think separate repo is pretty straightforward. I mean, that's the worst case if they say no.
yeah, that would just make our lives
Yeah, and
quite a
it's
bit
much
easier.
easier than today, which is just like updating that thing is a nightmare.
Yeah, I'm down if we could get the repo through for sure.
Cool. Yeah.
I bumped that PR and tagged somebody. Let's see. Let's see.
Please end the pain. Yeah, because it's
Rita is
you're gonna
back
need that
channeling.
code anyway.
I am. No, I mean, I'm not back channeling. It's all front. It's just
Front
tagging
channeling.
a friend. Tagging
You're
a
back channeling right in front of our faces,
Yeah,
Rita.
there you go.
How dare you?
All right. If there's nothing else, shall we look at the agenda?
Yeah.
Maybe before that, I don't think I've met Andrew yet. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'll just be real quick. My name's Andrew. I know I've seen a number of your guys' names on GitHub. As you probably have seen me doing a lot of contributions to the Gatekeeper library, one in particular. So just been working here with Max at Google for a while now, and focused primarily on content for Gatekeeper in particular. So just happy to put some names to faces and help out where I can.
Awesome. Welcome.
Thanks.
And thank you for all your contributions.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you here.
It's a little ominous. I'm wondering what that means, but okay.
It was meant to be welcoming. I just am awkward. So
No, it's all good. I just figured I got signed up for something now, but that's okay. I'm happy to help.
Surtash, I know you're taking notes. Can you put it in May 3rd and not May 10th? Just to mess with you, yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, my bad.
No worries, no worries. All right, I think I had the first agenda. It's hopefully not gonna take too long. I was just looking at I had a PR out I think a couple of days ago, and I was updating our design docs wiki, or not wiki, README, and I realized some of the links stopped working because they're Google Docs. And I think someone else raised this before because these are people's personal Google Docs, actually. So maybe I was thinking like, hey, how can we persist these design docs so that they don't like get deleted accidentally or whatever. One thought was following what KEPs are done, how KEPs are done in Kubernetes. Could we just check these in as READMEs into the repo?
yeah, I like having the discussion stuff on Google Docs because like commenting is very low friction. But once they're finalized, I think it makes sense to
move it.
Yeah.
I'm okay with that. Or do you feel like even the comments, if they are done as PR comments, is that good or no?
It's just really hard to maintain context in a GitHub thread, right? Like a commit comes and wipes out the anchoring, or the thread gets collapsed. So in terms of like at least the initial stuff, right, where there's a high volume of feedback, I personally, I find the KEP process like hard to keep track of at that stage. But I don't know. Is there any conflict between the idea of once we've settled on an idea, then move it to GitHub?
Oh, I only commented on that because once you migrate, then you lose the comments, right? Since
Yeah.
which are quite valuable in my opinion, because sometimes like if you just migrate the content over, you lose the context for why a decision was made or what were the concerns at the time.
We can add a link to the Google Doc.
We can, but then the docs can get deleted.
Yeah, we're full circle. I'm
I
wondering,
have a
is there a,
suggestion.
was it?
I have a suggestion. Like, can we do something like, I mean, so we have the Google Docs and we maintain that link, I mean, link list, I guess, like where all the docs are or where all the proposals are in the repo in the README file, right? What we can do is when we add entry to it, uh, at that point in time, or when that PR gets approved, we also add the backup of that in some folder in our repository, just as a backup, like an actual doc. So we'll still have the Google Docs where we have all the history and all, but we'll treat this whatever we put inside the repo as just a backup. So that in case Google edit things got lost or something like that, something happens to it, then maybe we can just have fallback in our repo. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. I think that tracks. It does make a question of like, well, what happened? Like, we're not backing up the comments still.
Right.
I want to draw
Yeah,
attention
that
real
is
quick to the comment that Alex posted in the chat too. So like this is what for Kubernetes Code of Conduct Committee, we have like a Google Drive owned by CNCF that like is long living.
Okay.
So like maybe that's the route rather than tying them to folks' individual Google accounts. Like it would be a shared ownership that like.
I didn't know we can do this because it will help in another place also. We have Google Analytics, where right now I'm using like my personal account. So it would be good to move that to here as well. Like if we have this arrangement, that would be good.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, if you already have the credentials or whatnot, like bootstrapping it would be the hard part. Go ahead, Sardesh.
I was just gonna say we can also lock it once we are done.
Lock the doc?
Yeah.
Okay. Like what is I actually didn't know you could do that. Does that mean no more comments on it? Or is it?
Yeah, I think so. I think you can like turn off the collaboration, right? That's possible.
You can make it read only.
Yeah, basically, yeah, make it read only.
But I think the owner can still delete it.
Yeah, like owners have owner permissions.
You should be worried about rogue owners then.
But I think that's like a very like a niche use case, like a contributor will have to delete it.
Yeah, like I mean, owners could delete code. Someone could delete the OPA, what is it, org on GitHub. That would not be great.
It's not even intentional, right? It's just it happened. That's the point.
Yeah. Well, I mean, does the idea of having a third party owner like the, I guess, Code of Conduct Committee solve that for you?
This is probably not code of conduct, but probably like CNCF. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure like if it is CNCF that owns ours. I can find out how that works to see if they can just create a shared drive for us that we can put docs into.
Andrew, do you mind if I put you down?
Go ahead. I'll track it down.
Awesome.
Check for Google Analytics as well, because that's like probably essentially separate from docs. I'm not sure if there is a process around it or not.
Yeah, and analytics, we might run into like privacy policy stuff, which honestly we should be adhering to anyway. So we should double check if there's anything governing that.
It should be actually really easy for analytics because you can add individual people there. So let's say if we create a property for gatekeeper, right? Then we can add the gatekeeper specific folks. So I think that would be pretty much locked down and can work independently for various different
Right.
projects, I
Not
guess.
like analytics security. I mean more just like what sort of data we gather.
Sure. I mean, it's all open, right? I mean,
I don't know. That's
site is
I'm
also
sure
open,
the
I guess.
CNCF has a thing. I don't know what it is. And that was more my point. Like, it's probably fine, but I don't know. Okay. But anyway, so Rita, assuming that Xander investigates and it turns out we can do a thing, does that solve your concern?
Yep.
Okay,
So
cool.
we have, as long as we have some follow-ups. Yeah.
Right.
Great. Thank you for the suggestion, Alex. Let's see what else. Xander, I think you're up next.
Yeah, let me pop open a screen share. Okay, so I've started working on the public-facing roadmap for Gatekeeper. Note that at this time it is still private, not open the floodgates on this yet. I have added the 4 items that we have tagged for the next milestone so far. If you jump here, you can see that we have these with a target date of July 31st. So with all these roadmaps I've done for projects, I always kind of put the like disclaimer, like target dates are aspirational, not a promise by any means. If I recall from when we were first talking about this, we said that in the past, we've said we release every 2 months, but that has, for like the last 3 releases, ended up consistently being every 3 months rather than 2. I could be wrong on that. Feel free to correct me if that's not the case. So July puts us at 3 months from 3.12. So pulling up the milestones, we have just a tentative July 31st on 3.13. And then here are the ones, the issues, and in the case of PubSub PR that we have added to this milestone. If there are any issues that you think we plan to tackle in 3.13 that are not represented here, feel free to let me know and I can get them added. And then I'll continue building out the roadmap to pull in stuff from 3.14. But yeah, I mostly just wanted to do like a check-in to see, like, do folks feel we're on track for, like, do these things still make sense for 3.13? Are we still feeling good about that? Just a vibe check.
Yeah, yes. I am wondering about the threshold for inclusion versus disinclusion, right? Because I could see other stuff being raised in issues, right, that might be small enough to fit in here. But, you know, are they then too small to show up as like a roadmap item?
The way that I've been thinking about that is the milestone and the roadmap are not directly associated with each other. So the roadmap, I add things to that manually. That is really for user experience impacting changes. The milestone, I think anything that y'all plan to do in that release, go ahead and throw that on the milestone just as a tracking mechanism. If you feel like it, that's fine. the roadmap, I will end up keeping that set aside for like a user that comes to visit the repo, like, hey, what's coming down the pipeline for Gatekeeper that I should care about? Like, it's more like big rock items. That's the way I see it, at least.
Gotcha. And to make it concrete, there's an issue fairly recently that was saying like, hey, I don't have any sort of signal around constraint templates that are failing with a runtime rego error, right? Kind of a smallish UX change, kind of medium in terms of development work to get in there. So not trivial, definitely user facing, definitely someone would find it helpful. Roadmap item or not really?
Yeah, I'd say I'd probably, my instinct for that would be yes. Like anything, yeah, I guess user facing is kind of the easiest line to draw, I feel like.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
When do you plan to make this public?
I can do it anytime. I just wanted to make sure that it looked okay with y'all before I clicked the big scary button. And then I'll probably open a PR on the README just towards the bottom with a link that points to it.
So one thing about having both roadmap and milestone is I do kind of feel like it's added work for the maintainers to now having to add them to both places now. But at the same time, I see the value of like making it, like to your point, maybe easier for a consumer to just say, hey, these are the big items that I'm getting in this release.
Well, I think the distinction is milestone is our thought that this release will definitely have this, whereas roadmap is this is where our attention is.
And I think
we remember to add them to both places.
Yeah, I'd say for now, like y'all can leave that to me and like I'll drive that.
Okay.
I don't think that I'd have to look into this. Ideally, there would be like we'd be able to just do like label automation where like on an issue or PR, you'd be able to just add a roadmap label and then it would tie it to. But I know that like with GitHub projects, they have like been kicking that like custom workflow feature like down the road for like 2 years. I think you can like build custom workflows with the GraphQL API, but that's GraphQL, which is still a thing I don't know anything about.
I think that the value of this is the timeline, though. I think that's the distinction. Like, we are not using that. I mean, everything's on like 31st of whatever month is that? August?
Yeah, it's just mainly because I've only added the first milestone chunk here.
Oh, I see. So in theory, like let's say the pub sub interface one, right? Like we could have like alpha, beta, stable as like
yeah.
That would be really helpful, actually. Yeah.
But do we want to be that granular about like the timelines? Like, so this could be like, hey, the pub sub merges on 26.
Yeah, like I like the idea of the sequencing, the exact dates.
In the past, I've always just done like I know what month we're targeting, and I've thrown things on the last date of that month with just a note. I don't know if I added to this one yet, but I usually have like a note in the description, like target dates are aspirational, which is, so like we've called this field target date and set that to the end of the month. Hopefully in the future, GitHub lets us change the granularity of this access, but right now it's only like broken down by day.
Oh, you cannot assign to specific days?
So what I have here is if you like click the issue, you can see I have target date set to July 31st. It doesn't let you set that by month, just by date, which is why I've done, I know that like, okay, we're targeting July for this release. Everything is just set to the last day in July, and we're calling that a target date.
Can you show what it will look like to see like alpha, beta, and stable?
So right now, everything on here is an issue or a pull request. We could add sub beta just as an item, and then target date that for August 31st. And then that gives us a little arrow to extend here and pushes that out that way. You can also have like a start date and an end date field. I've only done like a condensed target date field, but if you do like a start date and an end date, this box will stretch that entire window like Gantt chart style. Stuff can be converted to issues from here.
Cool. I mean,
Yeah.
anyone, like I said, I like the idea of showing where our attention is at, and I like the sequencing. This seems like it approximates that. I'm okay with the date thing personally. Anyone else?
I'd like to, if folks are okay with it, add some of the stuff we're thinking about for the 314 milestone, which I don't think we landed on that. So maybe that's not a good idea. We just had like, I just had a couple like question marky ones.
Yeah, like
to play with it. Maybe we're not that far out.
Yeah, personally, Starlark, I'm okay if it shows up. I don't personally want to contribute time to it right now. Sorry, Andrew. Yeah. Just because the focus is on the cell catch. But I wouldn't like be sad if someone else started working on that. The risk with that though is that the engine interface may like change a little bit as we're figuring out the cell cap stuff.
Right. Well, I'm happy to leave just the 313 items on there for now. And then if folks are okay with it, I'm thinking just every one of these meetings, maybe just do like a 5-minute, 10-minute check-in on the milestones. And then as 314 starts to take shape a little bit, I'll build that section of it out as well. I cede my time.
The Honorable Xander cedes his minutes. Amlan, it looks like you're the next topic, yeah?
Yeah, thanks. Is my audio okay?
Yeah.
Okay, I was just kind of curious, in the course of the mutation design, did it ever come up that people wanted a way to assess like what existing resources would be mutated if they were to be recreated after the mutation was implemented?
There was initially some thought around a controller that would mutate existing resources to sort of have them conform to the mutation policy. That was another reason for having such a premium on convergence. That was sort of Red Hat was interested in that when they were contributing mutation. I don't know where they've gone. So I don't know if they still have an interest in that. It's not like exactly on point either, just kind of similar. Yeah, I can't. Do you remember anything like that, Rita?
This sounds similar to the thing I brought up last week. Somebody wanted Gator to test mutations, right? To like output, and I think I created an issue for this. I'm not sure if this is what you're thinking on.
Does sound familiar, yeah.
Like Gator test should mutate resources before validating them, essentially.
No. This is just to test, sorry, to generate what the new resource will look like from the list of mutators that you point Gator to. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Let me put it in the chat. This is what I added from last week. Oh, yeah, sorry. Sorry. Wow, all three of us. That's so funny.
What was the use case for the Gator mutate?
So basically, given a list of mutators that you want to deploy to your cluster, right? If you have a resource, after the mutators applied, what would the final output look like?
Yeah, but do they want to use for like shift left sort of thing? Like what would it happen if we were to mutate in Kubernetes sort of
I
way?
think it's for shift left, but it's also probably also for testing the mutators.
Yeah. You could pipe Gator into Gator. Gator mutate, pipe to Gator test.
Wow.
I mean, you can. I think that sounds like a good use case.
Yeah, like validate after the mutators. Yeah.
I think
Sorry, real quick before I forget, the person who asked for this at KubeCon said Kai Vernal already has this. Sorry, Alan, you were saying.
Oh yeah, I think that's a great use case. I think I was thinking of like actually kind of a different use case for like my question, which is people wanting to know what existing resources are in violation of that mutation, essentially. So when they apply a mutation, they want to know like, okay, not just that it's acting on future resources, but also like what current resources are a problem.
Do not currently conform to me. Yeah, the interesting thing about that, and this doesn't like negate its value, is that because you have mutation webhooks that mutate in sequence, you can have something that, even if it was created after the mutator was in place, is still technically in violation of the mutator. Or the mutation system as a whole, I should say, not a mutator. Interesting. So something, would this be in Gator or Gator test? Because I was thinking like you could basically offload the state of a cluster, right? On like pull it onto disk, run this putative Gator mutate command. And if there were any deltas, that's essentially this. That's like a low development effort way of getting that kind of feature. But then you're putting it on the user to obviously offload their cluster config. Audit, potentially, like this could be added to audit, right? Like you could call mutate and look for a diff and say whether there was a diff. I don't know where we'd report that necessarily. like, you know, in the logs events, we couldn't put it in a constraint or a mutator because, you know, you wouldn't be able to identify necessarily which mutator was relevant at that point. What? Sorry, I'm looking at the chat here. So, at what point are we building a new webhook?
Like if you have to maintain the order of things.
Oh no, I mean we maintain order now, right? Like the Kubernetes system has a definite ordering for mutators, even though it's not published.
Gator doesn't. I think I'm just.
Oh, we do.
Oh, we do for Gator?
Yeah, so is the mutation system, whenever you add a mutator, we have a stable ordering that's essentially, it's like group kind namespace name, probably, where the group kind namespace name of the mutator are the absolute, define the absolute ordering of the various mutators.
Max, I was thinking more that it would be difficult to replay the mutators if they were added over time, right? If you had ones that had conditions and you don't know when they were added in what order over time, trying to do an audit now, it's unlikely, but it could be difficult to sort of understand how those interactions would be. You know, was there a mutator that added something no matter what, and now that's lower in the stack than one that would add something if it didn't exist? You run into those kind of problems, so it's hard to know.
Yeah, you would definitely get unstable results after every change to the set of mutators. But that's also kind of the value, right? Like if the state of the system as it exists is different than the state of the system as the policy today would make it, right? I think that's what the user is interested in determining, right? So the goal would be to like wait for things to settle and then run, or at least pay attention to the results of a scan like this. Yeah, is the discussion here, are we wondering whether we should do something like this, what something like this would look like? What kind of conversation are we having?
I don't know what Rita envisioned for her issue, but for me, I was just curious in terms of, yeah, we're kind of wondering how to deal with that use case of, and wondering whether that's like a gatekeeper side feature or whether we would build something out on our end. So it was just a little bit of curiosity.
Yeah, I think the Gator stuff is like a much lower bar to clear, right? Because the reporting and all of that is like very obvious how that would work, and we're dealing with like at-rest stuff. There's no controllers to write. With mutation, I'm very interested in what Joe will talk about next week, because honestly, I think that's where, you know, when we talk about what we should do or should not do with mutation, if we should like continue to invest in mutation, you know, a lot of that hinges on, well, what is Kubernetes planning to do with like native mutation, right? And
yeah, but the Gator, I don't think Intri is gonna ever touch Gator, but like
right, yeah. Good.
Sorry, I just meant like no matter what we do in Intri, I still see a ton of value of Gator the CLI because that is a differentiator, right, for Gatekeeper.
Yeah, we should. I don't think adding the Gator, like your issue, I don't see any reason not to do that. More, it's like any like significant investment in syntax, right, or non-trivial, meaning like quarters worth of coding. I would, one, be concerned about us making it harder to integrate with K8s whatever K8s does, assuming that that's the path we go down once we see the end result here, or to writing stuff that doesn't actually complement what K8s is doing, right? Like external data, I think is a good candidate for us to do better than what internal K8s will do for mutation. I mean, just early days. That's total speculation. But one thing we do have is the ability to parallelize those calls, right? And I'm not sure if one, K8s would even be interested in external data, and two, if they would, what they design would wind up being parallelizable.
Just getting back to Alon's issue though, like I'm still a little confused about if this is purely about Gator or this is about audit, because you mentioned both. If it's just Gator, I feel like if we added Gator mutate or mutation, whatever we want to call it, then potentially users could just say Gator mutator and then Gator test, right? Point to whatever the output directory is, right? Or we could add another command like that does everything, right? Like that, I feel like that's not too bad. Whereas the auto one, I feel like it's harder. And I want to understand what you were envisioning for the audit piece.
So when you say audit, do you mean like literally the audit process, or just this idea of scanning a live cluster?
I want to know what Alon meant when she added that. That's for clarification. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Like when I added that to the meeting notes?
Yeah, because you said a template. I didn't know what that meant.
Yeah. So I was actually envisioning, like, is there a way to convert the syntax of a mutation into like an audit template so that someone could just apply that audit template, the template to their cluster and see like what would be in violation? Obviously, it would be tricky because, like Max said, two mutators could cancel each other out, so to speak. And so it would look like it was in violation of one, but ultimately be okay with the other. But just like that had been my initial thought. Basically, like, can we apply like an audit template next to a mutation that says these are the resources that would be affected that are like in violation of this mutation. But after hearing, sorry.
I'm just wondering what an audit template would mean.
Like a template with a dry run effect, like a template that then we would assign a constraint with dry run as the effect. So it's
like a constraint template that essentially says the mutation must not have an effect on this object is what you're saying. Okay.
Yeah. But I also understand what Max brought up about like probably the easiest thing would just be to dump the cluster and then run like run a diff after running Gator mutate. So
right, that's why I was saying, are you looking at like just shift left, or are you also looking at in cluster, which is harder, right?
Yeah.
Honestly,
but not to say it's not impossible, because with like the expansion feature, right, you could technically use mutator to do that already, right?
Yeah, like honestly, multi-engine might make this very easy to do with existing, like your idea essentially, right? So if we had a very small engine that just accepted the same mutation system that we're injecting everywhere else, right, as part of bootstrapping, and basically the only thing it did was return like, yes, there is a delta, no, there is not a delta, right? And that if there's a delta, it's a violation. Then and the audit results would be reported on the constraint. The constraint could be used to scope what gets scanned. It's automatically like you get audit for free because it's just another constraint. Yeah. I think we're blocked just a little bit on, I mean, not even really all that much, because we have multi-engine. Like there's code-wise, there's no reason why this couldn't be done.
Why is this related to multi-engine? I'm not sure I understand.
Well, that would be a way of implementing what Anlan was suggesting with the audit template, right? Is that, so there are sort of two ways I would do that if I really wanted it in a constraint template, right? I could either add a function in Rego, right, that calls out to a mutation system. And that has some challenges around like, what are you actually like passing into the mutation system, you know, and dealing with objects and processing the result. Or I could just write something that calls out to the mutation system directly, right? And so the extra engine cuts out Rego as kind of a middleman here.
Yeah, but that's like so much more work than you already have the constraint templates in Rego. You already have the mutators. Like,
Oh, it's actually not much more work. So the, what's that?
You're talking about writing a new driver, right?
Yeah, that would probably be maybe 100 lines of code.
Right, but then you're not leveraging what we already have. Like you're not leveraging existing policies or existing mutators.
You would, like it, you would, the engine would wrap the mutation system, right? So it would basically have the same state as the mutating webhook.
Yeah, but then you're not leveraging the existing constraint templates. Right.
What existing constraint template?
Like the existing regos that we already have for in the library.
Well, there's no Rego that could do this because it would need access to the mutation system.
Right, but I would imagine users want to leverage existing things, right? Because the difference here is not you're trying to create a brand new policy per se. You're trying to leverage the existing policies, but the only difference is you want to look at the mutated object versus the one that's already in the cluster.
But that is a new policy, right? There's no policy currently that says given mutation is if I were to apply mutation, would there be 0 changes here?
Well, policy is the overloaded term. I mean like existing regos.
Again, there's no mechanism in Rego to do that. Like you could write an embedded Rego function, right? The same way we have the external data Rego function, right? And that would be another way of doing that. My question would be, is there any use for that other than this very specific policy, right? And if not, then it's less performant, right? Because you're going through Rego, and it's probably more work because it's probably equivalent work. Yeah, it's hard to say. But you know, then like what else would it be used for, this Rego function that basically takes an object and returns a Boolean of yes, there are changes, or no, there are not.
Were you thinking, Rita, for like the existing Rego, were you thinking what I was thinking initially of like basically reinterpret the mutation logic as like Rego logic of like, does this annotation exist? Like checking like say, or does this label exist or whatever? Is that what you were thinking?
Yeah, like you will leverage the way the rules are written are still very much the same. It's just the input instead of like it being part of the request, you're actually saying what is it's almost how the expansion stuff works, right? the expansion stuff is generating fake objects, right? But the rules themselves are still Rego. So you're leveraging existing Regos. The only difference is your input is mixed with fake objects.
I'm super, like, I don't see how that, so my understanding is the rule is, would mutation do a thing here, right? If yes, violation. If no, you're good. Is that accurate, or am I misinterpreting what people are asking for?
I'm still just trying to understand the requirement. Sorry.
Okay, well, and so yeah, as a requirement, is that the requirement, right? That people want to say existing object agrees with what mutation would want it to look like.
Alon, you can answer this since you're the one that came up with this.
Yeah, that makes sense to me as a requirement. And then maybe like a secondary requirement of like which mutation would change it. Which is where I guess would be trickier with the the option of just running it through all of the mutators at once.
Yeah, honestly, I don't think the which mutator would change it as possible, to be blunt, just because everything is so layered, right? And yeah, a mutator that sets everything equal to, like, sets image pull policy to always for everything, but then there's another mutator after it that for a specific image sets image pull policy to always or never, whatever the opposite of what I just said was, then yes, that original mutator's intent is technically not completely there, but gatekeeper mutation as a whole, the output is consistent.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Yeah, the canceling each other out thing is definitely something I thought about, and then I just sort of figured hopefully the cluster administrator knows if they wrote mutators that cancel each other out, but I recognize that that is like
That's
just
why
a fundamental design.
Makes sense, right? Because you're feeding all the mutators to Gator and then producing the final object, and then you test the final one. That's why I didn't think it made sense as an audit thing.
Yeah, I think I could see it makes sense as an audit thing. And actually, like Alon's model of, I'm forgetting, like, audit template or whatever you called it. That idea is a great way of doing that, using stuff we already have, if that's something we wanted to do. And we could talk about, there's like two different ways of doing that, either through Rego or creating our own engine. Maybe that's an implementation detail. I think, though, what I'm hearing in this discussion, though, is Gator mutate is probably the first order of business. And then if we wanted to do this other thing, there is a path forward for that. And if we wanted to have a like cost minimization discussion and feature set discussion, probably it would be around, do we go through Rego or is this its own thing?
The other thing about the audit case is also, like, today we rely on the API server to tell us what is mutatable. Whereas, like, if you're doing an audit, like, what is the mechanism that tells you, like, for example, a pot spec, right? Not everything is mutatable or updatable. Like, so all that logic, you would have to, if you were to write another engine, you would have to take care of all that. Today, audit, we'd rely on, today for audit, we don't do any of that, right?
Well, no, pod spec is mutatable in terms of like mutation webhook. You just can't update parts of the pod spec.
Sure, but now you're saying, like, I'm gonna run through all these mutators, and you have to take care of that logic as far as like what is updatable or not.
No, you're just returning whether or not mutation it's in alignment with if that same pod were to have been created now, would it look the same?
Yeah, but anyway, we're at time. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm just saying it's something that the mutating webhook does today that we wouldn't be able to do. So, I mean, we can follow up.
Yeah, I'm not sure what that is, but yeah, we can chat.
Okay. All right. See ya.